Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns quarterback, the $230 million man, the most polarizing figure in the NFL. How does a kid who literally helped build his own house end up here? How do you hand someone a fully guaranteed $250 million in the middle of the biggest scandal the sport has ever seen? And how, after all of it, is this man walking back out as a starting quarterback in 2026? Stick around, because the real story of Deshaun Watson is stranger, darker, and far more complicated than any highlight will ever tell you. There are two stories about Deshaun Watson, and they refuse to fit neatly together. One is the story of a boy from public housing in Georgia who willed his family out of poverty and became one of the most naturally gifted quarterbacks of his generation. The other is the story of a man accused by more than 24 women of sexual misconduct, a scandal that reshaped how the NFL polices its own players and left his reputation permanently divided. Any honest account has to hold them both at once. This is not a highlight reel, and it is not a takedown. It's an attempt to tell the whole thing straight. Deshaun Watson was born in September 1995 in Gainesville, Georgia, the son of a single mother named Deshaun Watson, one of 4 children raised largely on her own after their father left. For years, the family lived in government-subsidized housing, in a neighborhood Watson has described plainly as a hard place to grow up, with crowded apartments, little room, and little margin. The turn came from something small. As a boy, Deshaun brought home a flyer for Habitat for Humanity, the nonprofit that helps families build and own affordable homes. His mother committed to hundreds of hours of volunteer labor, and in the mid-2000s the family moved into a house of their own, a home connected to the foundation of former NFL running back Warrick Dunn, whose Warrick Dunn Charities partnered with Habitat for Humanity and was there when the keys were handed over. For an 11-year-old who had never had his own room, it was, in his own words, a special moment. He had helped build the house he would grow up in. Then came the test that shaped him more than any game. During his high school years, Deanne was diagnosed with tongue cancer. She underwent surgery to remove her tongue, followed by long stretches of chemotherapy and radiation, cared for by extended family while she recovered. She survived, she remains cancer-free, but the ordeal left lasting effects. Those who knew Watson then describe a teenager who stayed calm, kept playing, and carried the weight quietly. He has said, again and again, that his mother's resilience became the model for his own. On the field, the talent was undeniable from the start. Watson led Gainesville High to a state championship, then committed to Clemson under coach Dabo Swinney. There, he became a 2-time Heisman Trophy finalist and the centerpiece of one of college football's best teams, even playing through a torn ACL at one point rather than sit down. One of his teammates at Clemson, wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, would later reunite with him on the Houston Texans, a connection that made their professional partnership feel almost inevitable. His defining college moment came in January 2017, when he led Clemson on a late drive to beat Alabama and win the national championship, throwing the game-winning touchdown in the final seconds. Months later, the Houston Texans, then coached by Bill O'Brien, traded up to select him 12th overall in the NFL draft. The professional ascent was rapid. A torn ACL cut his rookie year short, but he returned to become one of the league's most exciting young quarterbacks. Mobile, accurate, unflappable in the pocket. By 2020, he led the entire NFL in passing yards, throwing for 4,823 yards, a number that put him in genuine MVP conversations. He looked, at that moment, like a franchise cornerstone for the next decade. So, how does a player this beloved, this talented, become one of the most radioactive names in the NFL almost overnight? In the spring of 2021, everything changed. Beginning that March, women started filing civil lawsuits against Watson in Texas, accusing him of sexual misconduct during private massage appointments. Houston attorney Tony Busby filed the first lawsuit and ultimately represented the majority of the women who came forward. What began as a handful grew into a wave, 24, and eventually around 27 women. Their allegations, laid out in court filings, ranged from exposing himself and unwanted touching to, in some cases, coercing sex acts. One woman alleged sexual assault. Watson denied all of it and has maintained his innocence throughout. The legal outcomes are part of the record and matter. Two separate Texas grand juries declined to bring criminal charges, and he was never criminally convicted. But the civil cases told their own story through sheer accumulation. So many separate women, so many similar accounts, described in filing after filing. Watson settled the overwhelming majority of the suits, with terms kept confidential. For many observers, the settlements closed the legal chapter without resolving the moral one. This is the part of the story that cannot be smoothed over. However one weighs the absence of criminal charges against the volume of civil claims, the accusations were serious, they were numerous, and they became the defining fact of his public life. But if you think the accusations were the most shocking part of this story, wait until you hear what a struggling NFL team decided to do next. The reckoning collided with one of the most controversial personnel decisions in recent NFL history. In March 2022, with the lawsuit still unresolved, Jimmy and Dee Haslam's Cleveland Browns, with general manager Andrew Berry executing the deal, traded a haul of draft picks for Watson and signed him to a fully guaranteed contract worth roughly $230 million, the largest guarantee the league had ever seen, handed to a player in the middle of a legal crisis. The move drew immediate and widespread criticism, and it pushed other teams and the league itself to confront questions they had largely avoided. The NFL conducted its own review under the personal conduct policy. Independent arbitrator Sue L. Robinson initially ruled a 6-game suspension, but the NFL appealed, and the result was ultimately an 11-game suspension for the 2022 season, a $5 million fine, and a requirement that Watson undergo evaluation and a treatment program before returning. It was one of the most significant disciplinary actions the league had ever taken against a star player, more severe than the 6-game suspension initially handed to Ben Roethlisberger in 2010 under similar conduct policy scrutiny. And to critics, still not enough. When he finally returned to the field, he did so as a lightning rod, greeted in opposing stadiums by protest as much as by football. So, here's the twist nobody saw coming. Just when Watson finally had the chance to answer every critic the only way an athlete can, on the field, his own body turned against him. Whatever Watson was going to prove on the field, his body stopped cooperating. He returned rusty, having gone nearly 2 years without competitive football, and never recaptured his old form. In 2023, a shoulder injury ended his season after 6 games. Then came a torn Achilles, and later a re-torn Achilles. Injuries that cost him most of 2 full seasons and raised real questions about whether he would play meaningful football again. The player who once led the league in passing had, by the mid-2020s, appeared in only a handful of games for the team that bet everything on him. Meanwhile, Cleveland moved on around him. The Browns turned to younger quarterbacks, including a rookie who seized the job late in 2025, and entered a new era under a new coaching staff. Watson's place on his own team was suddenly uncertain, so is this a redemption story? A comeback for the ages? Or something a whole lot messier that no highlight package will ever untangle? By early 2026, the last of the civil lawsuits had been dismissed, and Watson was, at last, free of the legal cloud that had followed him for 5 years. That summer, after a long rehabilitation and a genuine competition for the job, the Browns named him their starting quarterback to open the 2026 season, a return few would have predicted at the depths of his injuries. And so the two stories arrive at the same man, still unreconciled. Depending on who is telling it, Deshaun Watson is a testament to resilience. A kid from a Habitat for Humanity home who reached the top of his sport, endured, and came back. Or he is a cautionary tale about how much talent and money can buy a second chance, and about the women whose accounts were settled quietly and never fully answered. Both versions draw on the same facts. Neither cancels the other out. What happens next on the field is, in the end, the smallest part of the story. The larger reckoning, over accountability, over what was owed and to whom, over what a comeback is actually worth, is one the sport and its audience are still working out. Some stories don't end with a clean verdict. This is one of them. So, what do you think? Is Deshaun Watson a resilient story that has earned its next chapter? The kid from public housing who never stopped climbing? Or is he proof that enough talent and enough money can buy almost anyone a second chance? Can he actually still play at 30 after everything his body has been through? Drop your honest take in the comments. This is a debate people are going to be having for years. And if you want to see how his 2026 season actually plays out, stick around, because this story is far from over.